I'm going to remake this part that I botched last time. I drilled a hole and it went through the edge on one side. Now we will use acetone to clean off the metal. 100% pure acetone. It's cheap and it's good for cleaning off any sort of metal before painting, coating, or doing any sort of surface treatments. It's also highly flammable, so that's something you need to watch out for. You dab it onto a paper towel or cotton swab and wipe the metal off. Do this until all the dye and any sort of grease or fingerprints are no longer visible. For an extra clean surface, you need to do this again with another clean rag soaked in acetone. It'll remove everything that the first rag didn't. Now I'll use some dye chem to mark the metal. Dye chem works just like the dye for my marker, except it'll resist a lot more than the marker will. It won't rub off as easily or wash off with oils or grease. Dye chem is an obvious choice when I need to do multiple operations on one part. You also want to make sure that most of the dye is dabbed out of the brush before you paint it on. If it's too thick, you won't be able to make marks that last very long. Just paint it over the metal nice and thin, like a happy little blood stain. Paint the whole area that you're going to mark out for your whole part. As I remake this part, I'm going to use a small drill bit to start the hole that goes through to the other side, and use it as a guide to step up the drill bits one at a time. That way I get more accurate placement of the hole in the end, and I can step it up, ensuring that the right size hole is in the right place. Other things I'll be doing in this video are drilling cross holes in the shaft collars that I made last time. These threaded holes will take set screws so I can bind the shaft collars onto the shafts that they go on. I'll also be setting up the bracket for the counter so I can mount that, and we can have the first semblance of some function on my coil winder. And now, some coffee. You've seen these scratch things before, but here it is again. I'm marking the outline of the part, the fold lines for the metal brake, and I'll also locate the holes. I'll put a little dimple at each cross line where a hole is going to go so the drill press can locate it. The next step in this process is to solve problems the way any good American would do, by whacking the crap out of it. Using a soft-faced dead blow hammer, I'm giving the metal some firm taps. It's going to straighten out the curves and make it flat relative to this 2x4, which to my knowledge is not surgical. I needed it to be flattened enough to bend it with the brake, but the bending process will make it flatter still and will also add rigidity. If I were making an amplifier chassis for a tube amp, I would make ribs like this and install them underneath the chassis to give it strength. Now that it's relatively flat, the next step will be removing the sharp edges, deburring, and rounding the corners using my bench sander. Last time I used a file, but the bench sander should be a lot quicker. This Win bench sander is basically useful, but it lacks somewhat in quality. If I had to buy it again, I would get a better model and spend a little more money. Some of the drawbacks include plastic parts that break or fall apart, as well as not having a good way to secure the vacuum hose. The warranty is also void if you use it without a vacuum hose. I'm using the sander to round the corners, flatten the edges, and remove burrs and splinters. The last thing I want is bits of steel to come off and go into my fingers. This is a lot faster process than the file, and I would do this a lot more if I had more room to set this up in a permanent location. I'm filing the corners now to make sure that all of the rough edges and all of the sharp parts are removed. The belt is 80 or 120 grit, I can't remember. Using 40 grit would be too aggressive and remove too much metal too fast. Maybe if I was trying to carve out a profile in the sheet metal, I would use that instead. Back over to the metal brake again. I've got this part sped up because you've seen me do this before. This tool wasn't very expensive, and it does everything I need it to do. The 22 gauge steel I'm bending in it now works very easily with just a little bit of hand pressure. Larger pieces I need to use levers to ensure I get enough force to bend. When I start building tube amp chassis on this channel for things like radios or amplifiers or other tube related equipment, you'll see it a lot more. I'm going to inspect the piece, and it's definitely a C channel. Next, I'm going to take the piece that it mates with and make sure that they fit together. If they don't fit together, then that's another scrapped part. There we go. There's not much more to say about these pieces, as you've already seen them. In this video, I'll be locating a hole on the side and drilling a cross hole. Then I'll be threading it. You can see how I've marked them with a marker and then scribed the center line. I'm going to be making a dimple on the center line and drilling a hole through. Once I drill the hole through, I'll be threading it with 632 tap, which will put screw threads in it for a set screw. The set screw will provide pressure against the shaft to keep it secure against the shaft. Simple. I made the mark with this gigantic marker that I have. This piece here will be different because I'll drill a second hole so I can solder a piece of 3/16 inch steel into it. That steel bar will be the crank handle, so I can turn the machine and make it do useful work. This is really the only function these things serve. Once I have a set screw hole in them, they'll press against the rod and stay in place, which will keep the rod where I need them. That's really all they do. Obviously, I got a new drill press vise, which seems a little nicer, and I can tilt it. That's going to be helpful when I need to drill out some of the steam cylinders that need angled holes. The point of this video is to find out how you drill a hole in a round object. You would think that the drill bit would skate over the curves of the object and it would not drill at all. To some degree that's true, especially if you try to drill off center and it ends up going down the end of the curve. God damn it. What I'm going to end up doing is using this ruler here as a guide. You can stick something like this on top of the round object and then look at it from the side. If it's straight, then that means you're on center. The point of the drill press sticks it down on top of the the curves, and it levels out one way or the other. So now I'm going to go ahead and drill this object. While I'm here, I think I'm going to revisit the construction of this part, which I failed to manufacture correctly the last time. This hole is supposed to be a guide hole that goes through and comes out the other side. Last time I drilled it all the way to 1/4 inch first, and then when I came through on this side, it skipped over and it ate through the edge. So what I need to do is I need to drill it again. I will actually drill it out to one size larger than 1/4 inch because I need to have a fit over the bar that it's going to sit on. I'll test fit it after 1/4 inch drilling and see if that fits. If it does, then I don't need to do anything else. will clamp this before I take my hand off. What you're seeing here is the drill when it pokes through the other side, trying to grab onto the remaining shreds of metal, and instead of cutting a clean hole, trying to spin the metal piece as the last shreds hold on. What I'm doing here is I'm going to use the weight of my vise to counter that, and instead of getting whacked in the hand, the metal in the vise will be heavy enough to keep it from free spinning and cutting my hand off. Now let's see if oh, how's that? Lovely. That's exactly what I needed. Now I just need to deburr the hole and I can be done for today. I've got 2 shaft collars chucked in the vise, clamped evenly so I don't warp the vise. Now I'm applying thread cutting oil, which is something that I've bought from the hardware store, and I called it steel sauce because I think I'm funny. This tool is a 632 tap and the smallest tap wrench I own. It's a tool for cutting grooves called threads on the inside of a hole so a screw can engage the hole. To cut the threads, you hold it upright like this, as straight as you can, and apply very little rotational pressure. The tap should do all the cutting work. You want to turn it no more than 2 or 3 turns and then back it out a little bit so the cutting threads can break the chips off. Otherwise you might find that the tap binds in the hole and breaks. You do not want to have to remove one of these from a hole. When you're cutting threads, it's a good idea to completely withdraw the tap and then run it through several times after cleaning it out. That way you make sure all the chips are cleared from the hole. If chips get stuck in the hole, it may be hard to engage a screw and may cause damage to the screw or the hole. I'm gonna do the same on the other hole now. The process is the same. It's also going to raise a burr on the inside of the shaft collar where I reamed a nice 1/4 inch hole. That means I'm going to have to go through with the reamer again and knock all those burrs off. Otherwise it won't fit correctly on the shaft and may even bind. You want to be as gentle as possible with these taps, only applying rotational forces. If you bend them or flex them, they are made of hardened steel, which is very brittle, so they can break. Machinists say it's a rite of passage to break off a tap in your work. I don't like scrapping parts, so I'm doing what I can to avoid rites of passage today. Now I'm going to take the tap and give it a good wipe down to remove all the chips. You don't want chips to remain on these taps because they can deform threads. When you cut threads, you want them to be as perfect as possible. I'm going to snug it up on the tool and set it aside for later use. I'm going to use this needle file to deburr these holes. Convex holes can kind of be a pain to deburr. The normal tools don't work so well. So you have to use a file and get in there manually. This piece I've already done. You might be able to see the threads inside there, but I've deburred the hole and it looks pretty good. That other hole on the side will be used for a thin steel rod, 3/16 in diameter. I'm going to bend it in an L shape and use it as a crank handle to turn the main shaft. This is going to be what makes my machine work at all. This is the counter housing with 2 holes marked. This is the counter itself, which is mainly a plastic body with a spring and a lever inside of 2 metal cups that screw together. This is the L bracket that's going to mount on the main frame of the machine. The two dots will locate holes that will be drilled in the steel housing. Screws will go through them to mount the counter onto the L bracket. To make this work, I need 3 pairs of holes that all line up. The metal case will have 2 clearance holes. Sheet metal screws will pass right through those and go into the plastic body. The L bracket will hold everything, and the plastic body will grip the screws using smaller holes. The screws will hold everything together, but they need to line up, like I already said. One other thing I'm going to have to contend with is that the second hole is in the middle of the counter body. That means one of the screws will likely have to be shortened so it doesn't interfere with the counter's motion. As I suspected, I had to grind some of the end of the screw for it to fit correctly. Before I ground it, it was too long and it got in the way of the counter's function and prevented it from working. So I took it to the belt sander and sanded it down until it was the appropriate length. Now that I can mount this counter on my coil winder, I can keep track of how many turns go on a coil for repeatability. That's the reason I'm doing this instead of simply running coils in bobbins on a power drill. My previous attempts at winding coils on a drill were kind of spray and pray. Hope you get the right value. Now that I have some more parts completed, I can reassemble the device and show you how it works. The shaft collars keep all of these rods in place where I need them to be. The one behind the counter has a screw on it that pushes the lever down, and this is what causes the counter to increase every turn. This is one of the more important parts of the coil winder because without it I don't know how many turns of wire I have on the coil. It's a little stiff because the shape of the screw isn't optimal for pushing that lever down. I think I'm either going to need to get a round-headed screw or redesign that shaft collar so it has a bit of eccentricity on it, push the lever down more. I know I said some of my collars were eccentric, but they're not eccentric enough to make a difference here. Plus, that's a 632 screw I took out of the scrap bin. I used to have them in computer cases. As it stands, it takes a little bit of force to turn the shaft hard enough to make the counter take over. Some people reported problems with the friction drive not being able to push the counter over, and I may have to replace it with gears. The parts I have left to make are 2 Delrin cones which secure the coil form on the threaded rod. I also need to make the friction plate, friction drive, and the cams which push the cam follower back and forth. The last part I will make is the wire shuttle which guides the wire. Thanks for watching this video series so far. I appreciate your viewership. I'm ready to be done with this project so I can wind some coils as well as move on to my next project. Bye for now and hope to see you again soon. Take care.